Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré reacts to UN warnings on Uganda. Hello everyone, and welcome back. What does it mean when the United Nations raises concerns about an election before ballots are cast? And what does it signal when a country's digital lifelines go dark at the very moment transparency matters most? In the days leading up to Uganda's 2026 vote, international observers voiced unease about the political environment, while authorities imposed restrictions on connectivity and curtailed the work of some civil society groups. Around the same time, a message attributed to Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso circulated widely, framing these developments not as isolated decisions, but as part of a familiar pattern that precedes contested transitions. Tonight, we're going to examine that pattern carefully, without slogans, without heat, and without choosing sides. We'll look at what UN warnings usually mean, how digital shutdowns reshape elections, and why long-standing systems face their toughest tests when visibility is limited. Stay with me. Dear friends, UN warnings about elections are not issued lightly. They tend to appear after monitoring teams observe consistent constraints on political space, pressure on opposition activity, limits on independent reporting, and rules that reduce citizens' ability to verify what's happening around them. When such warnings arrive before Election Day, they are usually less about predicting outcomes and more about signaling risk. Risk to credibility, risk to trust, risk to stability after the vote. In Uganda's case, the timing drew attention. Authorities cited security considerations for restricting connectivity. Supporters argued that temporary limits could prevent rumors from escalating. Critics responded that elections are precisely when visibility and verification are essential. When the public square narrows, confidence narrows with it. This is where the message associated with Ibrahim Traoré resonated beyond borders. It didn't endorse a candidate. It didn't instruct anyone how to vote. Instead, it framed Uganda's moment within a sequence many African societies recognize. First, tension builds. Second, independent voices face tighter rules. Third, communication slows or stops. Finally, the vote proceeds in an environment where fewer people can document or question the process. The claim isn't that every election following this sequence is illegitimate. The claim is that the sequence raises doubts that are difficult to erase afterward. Digital access has become central to elections, not because platforms decide results, but because they allow rapid documentation. Photos from polling stations, timestamps from counting centers, and independent tallies don't replace institutions. They reinforce them. When connectivity is restricted, institutions carry a heavier burden to persuade a skeptical public. Consider the role of observers. Civil society organizations and journalists don't certify outcomes. They record procedures. When their work is limited alongside a digital blackout, the absence of records becomes the headline. Even clean processes struggle to convince when the evidence is thin. The message attributed to Traoré emphasized pattern recognition. That idea matters. History shows that contested transitions often follow recognizable paths, not because leaders plan the same steps, but because systems under pressure reach for familiar tools. In the past, that meant controlling print and broadcast. Today, it often means throttling bandwidth. This shift, from broadcast control to bandwidth control, changes the public's experience. State messaging continues through official channels, while independent voices face friction. The result isn't silence, it's imbalance. Uganda's long incumbency adds another layer. When a leader has governed for decades, elections tend to feel less like routine contests and more like stress tests of the system itself. Supporters see continuity and experience. Critics see barriers to renewal. In that environment, measures framed as security can be interpreted as self-preservation. Enter the generational question. Younger voters are the most connected and the most affected by shutdowns. Their politics are networked, organizing, sharing, and documenting in real time. For them, connectivity isn't a luxury, it's the medium of participation. When networks go dark, the message received isn't calm, it's exclusion. This is why Bobi Wine functions as a symbol in the conversation. Beyond policies, he represents a generational challenge to a system built long before smartphones existed. Restricting connectivity during a campaign inevitably looks like an attempt to narrow that challenge's reach, regardless of intent. From the government's perspective, the concern is disorder. From the public's perspective, the concern is legitimacy. Both concerns are real. The question is which tools address them without creating new problems. UN statements typically avoid prescribing outcomes. They focus on conditions: equal access, freedom to report, and the ability for citizens to observe. When those conditions are constrained, post-election stability becomes more expensive to maintain. More enforcement, more monitoring, more persuasion. Over time, costs rise. The international response complicates matters. Reactions to shutdowns often vary depending on alliances and strategic interests. In some cases, restrictions prompt sharp criticism. In others, they're labeled domestic issues. Citizens notice the difference. Selective concern breeds cynicism, and cynicism erodes democratic norms. For American audiences, this isn't about Uganda alone. It's about a global trend. Elections everywhere now hinge on information architecture. Who controls networks? Who decides when they're restricted? What safeguards prevent political advantage? Traore's broader argument, as it circulated, pointed to sovereignty, not as isolation, but as accountability. Control over infrastructure can strengthen legitimacy if it expands access and resilience. It weakens legitimacy if it narrows visibility at decisive moments. There are alternatives to shutdowns. Governments can invest in rapid fact-checking, clear communication, independent monitoring, and rules that protect connectivity during elections. These approaches require preparation and trust, but they reduce doubt instead of amplifying it. There's also an economic dimension often overlooked. Even short blackouts slow mobile payments, commerce, and services. The burden falls on ordinary people, vendors, students, families, while political elites remain insulated. Over time, that gap matters. What happens after Election Day is just as important. If incumbency continues, can the system return to normal once confidence is shaken? If change is attempted, will institutions facilitate a peaceful transition? History suggests that uncertainty peaks not on voting day, but in the days that follow, when claims are weighed and trust is tested. That's why documentation matters. It's not about winning arguments online. It's about preserving a shared record that institutions can rely on. Traore's message also urged restraint. The emphasis wasn't confrontation. It was unity and civic discipline. Transitions are fragile. When citizens turn on one another, the long-term damage outlasts any result. The call was to protect people first by choosing openness over darkness. Uganda's blackout may have been temporary. Its implications are not. The path forward across Africa and beyond will be judged by whether leaders choose openness over control, confidence over fear, and transparency over darkness. Thank you for watching.